All right, good evening. Can everybody hear me? I think we're going to go ahead and get started. As you can see, we had an overwhelming crowd that decided to join us tonight, and we're trying to make accommodations out there for everybody that chose to join us. My name is Michael Morris. I am the director of the Museum of Mississippi History and Mississippi Civil Rights Museum as of about 4 or 5 months ago. Welcome to your museums, and welcome to the 7th Medgar Wiley Evers Lecture. If you haven't done so already, please silence your cell phones. Tonight, we're thrilled to welcome the one and only Joy Reid here today. This is actually the first lecture in the series to focus specifically on the historic accomplishments of Medgar and Myrlie Evers. And I want to thank Dr. Ebony Lumumba for agreeing to be in conversation with her. I want to take a moment to thank any of the movement veterans that happen to be in the audience tonight. If you're a movement veteran, and if you can, please stand. I see Dr. James Cameron here, and so many others. Dr. Robert Paris, thank you so much. I'd like to thank the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, whose generous and early support helped to build these museums and endow this lecture series. With us tonight is Rhea Williams Bishop. If she's here, could you please stand? There she is. Thank you and the foundation for your support. I know that we have a lot of local and state elected officials in the audience, such as Mayor Lumumba. Please know how much we appreciate your leadership and support of the work of the department. All right, we have with us our department director, Katie Blunt. Thank you so much. We also have with us MDH board members, Reverend Reginald Buckley and TJ Taylor. And then we have other members of the Foundation for Mississippi History. Special thanks to you and all that you do for the department. Without these folks, we couldn't do what we do on a daily basis. So let's give them another round of applause. And finally, I'd like to thank my good friend, Rena Evers Everett. She's the executive director of the Medgar and Myrlie Evers Institute, and I'd like for you and other members of the Evers family and the Institute to please stand so that we can recognize you. Nearly 20 years ago, Myrlie Evers made an extraordinary gift to the people of Mississippi when she presented her papers and those of her late husband to the Department of Archives and History. This is one of the most significant civil rights collections in the country, and one of the most significant collections that we have in our care. It was an incredibly generous gift and an important sign that the department was changing in ways that it needed to change. She and Rena and the Evers family have remained strong partners to the department, and we're very grateful to the relationship that we have with them and for the outstanding work of the Medgar and Myrlie Evers Institute. But before I sit, let me just say that I'd like for everyone in this audience to treat these museums as their second home. Become a museum member, attend some of our free events, and bring your friends and family when they come into town. I'm honored to be in this role, and I'm deeply committed to this work, and I appreciate your support of our team. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Marion Bruce, with the board of directors of the Medgar and Myrlie Evers Institute.
Good evening. Y'all can do better than that. That's better. I'm from the black church, so call and response is part of what we do. trying not to break something. Good evening. I'm Marino Bruce, chairman of the Medgar and Merle Evers Institute, and it is a distinct honor to welcome you to the 7th Medgar Wiley Evers Lecture, jointly sponsored by the Medgar and Merle Evers Institute and the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. We're grateful that you have decided to join us, and we are honored by your presence. We'd also like to thank the W.K. Kellogg Foundation for their continued support of this lecture series and the partnership between the Mississippi Department of Archives and History and the Medgar and Merle Evers Institute through a generous endowment. This lecture series was established in 2003 to honor Mr. Medgar Evers, 1 year after the chairman emeritus of MMEI, Dr. Merle Evers Williams, donated those papers that the current director talked about to the Department of Archives and History. This lecture series is becoming an institution in Jackson, as some of the nation's finest citizens and scholars have honored the Evers legacy with riveting presentations. The first Evers lecture speaker was one of the most underrated scholars of his era, the late Dr. Manning Marable of Columbia University. Civil rights hero Mr. Bob Moses gave an extraordinary presentation to commemorate Freedom Summer in 2014. Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., the Alphonse Fletcher University professor and director of the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard University, gave a provocative lecture in 2015. 3 years later, the Evers Lecture was given by Dr. Lonnie Bunch, the founding director of the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture and the current secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. Dr. Eddie Glaw Jr., the James Smith McDonald Distinguished University Professor of African American Studies at Princeton University, was the first native Mississippian to deliver the Evers Lecture in 2021. The most recent Evers lecturer was journalist and Pulitzer Prize-winning author, Miss Isabel Wilkerson, who has written 2 instant classics that will educate and inspire those interested in African American life for generations to come. Tonight, we will be blessed to hear insights and words of wisdom from another accomplished trailblazer who will be introduced by my friend and colleague, Miss Rena Evers Everett.
It works for me. Hello, my family in Mississippi. Boy, it's good to see you. No, it's good to see y'all. It's good to see y'all, every one of you, inside, outside, wherever you are. You bless us. We are all blessed to be together, and we're all blessed to hear this wonderful, wonderful friend of mine, of the family, who has captured the essence of my parents' love. Now, I know things have been said already about the civil rights veterans, but there's no way that you can stand up here and not honor them again. So please stand up and honor our civil rights veterans of the movement that made things possible for us. Some of them I remember when I was younger, older, and thank God I can still hug you and touch you. I thank you to the Medgar and Merle Evers Institute Board for being here and supportive. I thank you to my parents and to God, first of all, for blessing us with life. But I tell you, as a special little piece, I'm so happy to see some of my childhood friends here from Gines Street. Okay, give it up for Gines. But you know what's so important is family. So I like my family to rise and get an applause for being our support. I've seen them around. They've hugged me. There's only one. There we go. Now, there's one that a lot of you know that's not here, but here in spirit, and that's my Uncle Charles. So I just have to say, hey, Uncle Charlie, guess where we are back? We're here. Tonight, you're going to have a especially exciting history lesson, because that's what this is about. And the book, Medgar and Merle, Medgar Evers and the Love Story That Awakened America. There's so many stories like this one, but this one is special to me. And Joy, you've outdone yourself. So, without further ado, let me just say, we have two phenomenal women coming up here to present to you. We have the first wonderful lady of Jackson, Dr. Ebony Lumumba, my friend, yes. And the fabulous MSNBC, Harvard. Okay, I could go on and on and on, but you don't want to hear that from me. You want to hear it from her. Joy Ann Reid of Reid Out. Love you, honey.
Thank you. Am I? Oh.
Good evening, everyone. All right.
Hey, y'all.
You took it right to Mississippi. We appreciate that.
Look, listen.
We tried to be proper, didn't we?
We did.
Gave up on that. Oh, welcome, sister.
Thank you, sister.
Welcome to Jackson, Mississippi.
I always love being in Jackson, but this is especially meaningful to be here with all of you, to be here with our sister.
Yes.
Can we just one more time, please, for Miss Rena? My tour guide through Jackson, my connector, my friend, my beloved. And honor the family, please, one more time, the Evers family. An awesome family.
We'll be doing that all night, so.
We will. Oh, we could.
Y'all just get ready to rise and sit.
That's it.
Rise and sit. Welcome to our home. Michael told us the museum is our house, y'all.
Yeah.
So
You live here now.
We're just gonna come up in here anytime we get ready. No one's gonna stop us. Listen, I just want to tell you how honored I am to be here with you, because we get to put our best foot forward. It feels really good to honor people and bring them into your home when the family's here. Mm-hmm. And as I look out across this room, you're among family.
Yeah.
You're among family. I'll address the literal elephant in the room. We're among sisters.
Yes.
Of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Where are you all? Yeah.
The Divine Nine.
Yeah, that was for Miss Marley too. Okay. And now I see some purple and gold in the room.
Yes.
Hughes, it's not you. All corn.
Yeah! Yes.
Yeah, those braids. We appreciate y'all. Yeah, the family showed up for you. And so I want to start with something that you do in this book. And we're going to talk about the book. I'm trying not to do any spoilers to the spin that you put on this beautiful story that we know a little bit of, but you give us a little bit more. But you do something in the book that is almost like asking permission to proceed, which is something that we do in the tradition of our African people. We ask the elders
Yes.
for permission.
Yes.
And so one of the moments that you have in this book is saying, now hold up and wait a minute. I'm going to say Merle and Medgar, but be
That's
very
right.
clear
Yes.
that I honor them
Yes.
and that we are not being disrespectful by
That's right.
addressing them by their first names, which we would never do.
Which you would never
We
do.
would never do.
Oh, I was signing books outside with Miss. If you were over a certain age, I mean, it's just not in my nature to
That's
call
it.
people by the first names. It
You
just
were
isn't.
raised right.
Yeah.
That's what we call it. And so we're going to say Merle and Medgar
Yes.
this evening, but we want to be very clear
Yes.
that we are honoring our elders, we're honoring our ancestors, but we just, we can't say Evers because y'all don't know who we're talking about. A lot of honorable Evers in the room and not in the room. And so I appreciate that, and we want to bring that energy into this room. Let me say this, in that same vein, for us in Mississippi, the Evers, as far as I'm concerned, they're our royal family.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I got this Jackson State folder up here, but we recognize the royal purple and gold. They're a royal family, and so our interest in the Evers family and the Evers legacy, it's clear, it's apparent. We grew up passing and driving up and down Guyan Street. We passed the Masonic Temple. We know the Evers family, but I'm interested in what drew you to this story. Someone who may not have grown up with that influence and that vantage point. What drew you to this story about Merle and Medgar?
Well, it's very simple. It's a 2-word answer. Well, it's a 3-word answer. Merle Evers Williams. She drew me to it because, I had interviewed her before, just remotely on my week. I had a weekend show, AM Joy, and I'd interviewed her before, but I got a chance to actually meet her in person in 2018. It was life-changing. I was obviously knew of her and, honored her as a civil rights leader in her own right. She's just such a regal presence with that voice.
That voice.
And she speaks to you and you just are like, can I just, make you record my phone message so when people call, they say, good evening, this is Joy and Reid.
That's a good idea.
You know what I mean? She's brilliant. And so when I met her, I was just floored by her and by what she chose to share with me, which was how much she was still in love with Medgar Evers. Like when she spoke about him, it was so moving and it was so deep and it was so real that I said, Miss Merle, he's been gone for almost 60 years. You're like a little young schoolgirl who just met him on your first day at Alcorn still. Her feeling was so deep and so rich that it stayed with me literally for 3 years.
It was palpable.
It sat with me, yeah.
This love that she had for the love of her life that she
absolutely
still calls him.
And I didn't, get the chance to know Coretta Scott King or Betty or Dr. Betty Shabazz, but what struck me about it as just a history nerd, is that it really brought home to me that men like Medgar, who did this heroic thing as 20-something and 30-something-year-old men, right? And I used to remind my students, these men, none of them made it to the age Kobe Bryant did when he died. Kobe was 41. They were all 39, 38, 37. These were young men. Malcolm, Medgar, and Martin. None of them even were 40. So these were young men, and then Merle was even younger. We're talking about a 30-year-old when she lost her husband. And you think about the sacrifices a young person like that was willing to make for their family, for their state, for their country. That's that bravery and heroism that he had. He couldn't have done that and live that life without a wife who was willing to support him, fight with him, argue with him, wrestle with the reality of what he was doing, wrestle with the possibility she would lose him, and raise their 3 children who were little kids.
Children.
This lovely lady, I know she don't look much older than that now, but she was 8 when she lost her. She was, you know what I mean? She looked 20 now, but she was 8.
Yeah.
And the reality is these were parents of young kids They were normal people. And so I think what struck me about her was how extraordinary she is. But also, this is a real sister, a regular sister who did extraordinary things with the love of her life.
Which we all kind of have the capability of doing. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the takeaways.
Yes.
Is that when we read their story, it's not fantastical, right?
Right.
It's not something that's not attainable. You start to weave in the people that you've known and the situations and experiences that you've had.
Yeah.
And you can see yourself in certain moments. You talk about love, and you describe this in the book as a love letter
Yeah.
to Merle Evers Williams.
Mm-hmm.
You describe this as a love story first and foremost. So, which we know what happens. We know the story of Medgar and Merle Evers, at least we think we do, but for you to focus specifically on love, talk about why that was significant, why you wanted to tell this story from that position.
Yeah, and it's also the reason to, the point when you started of why I really wanted to call it Medgar and Merle rather than use their full surnames, their full names in the book, because I feel like their story, for us, this is our Romeo and Juliet. It's a tragic story, but it's a beautiful love story, right? It's a meaningful love story. And to me, that's the primary story.
Yeah.
This is the great love of this extraordinary woman's life. She loved again, Walter, her second husband. She loved Walt, but even Walt knew that Medgar was the. Oh, she was very clear, right? She told him. Oh, there's a great story in the book. I'm going to embarrass Miss Rita because Miss Rita used to be the gatekeeper. She used to be like, "You want to date my who? My mom? No, right?" She was standing in the way like, absolutely not, because even as a child, everyone understood very clearly this was the love of her life. So, I wanted to tell it through that lens because I also wanted to make Merle Evers Williams equal to Medgar in the magnitude of her contribution to the movement. Because the women that were married to these men were their secretary, their sounding board. They're the person who, when you're practicing your speech, you're practicing with her. They're the ones who had to cook when all of the luminaries from the NAACP or all the celebrities were coming to town and they're eating at the house.
I love that, because when these things are happening, we're protesting, marching, sitting at lunch count. People still got to eat dinner.
They still got to eat.
Kids still need to go to bed.
That's correct.
Who is keeping this day-to-day process and
That's
these
right.
operations
Don't.
going? We don't hear about that, and it's monumental. It's necessary.
And these were 1950s housewives. So in that
There's
era,
a social component there.
the social construct was that this is what women had to do. Even when they were in college, Merle was typing up his homework. Like this was the 1950s.
Girl, let me say this.
This was the 50s.
It's in the book, y'all.
Man, my mother sitting over there being like, see, he wouldn't even try it to see what it was. No.
But I think that was one of the most compelling moments of the way that you tell this story, because we'll be very clear, it's not a story that hasn't been told in parts.
Yes.
Right? But the way that you've decided to tell this story, it's compelling that you give us a whole Merle Evers. That neither one of them were each other's whole story.
Right.
Right? That they had these identities and they had these contributions that were separate from one another and then powerful when pulled together.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about Merle Beasley.
Yes.
Right? That's before Evers, y'all. Okay? Family knows that, friends know that. I want to talk about teenager Merle, before she meets Medgar, when she meets Medgar, and these dynamo women that raise her into the woman that we know her as, this regal, captivating figure that she is now.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what you discovered and how you got to know her beyond that first impression of meeting her and doing the research for this book.
Well, in the first interviews, I interviewed Miss Merle about half a dozen times, mostly on the phone. And some of the stories she loved to tell were about the woman she called Mama. Her grandma. and her Aunt Merle, same name as her.
Right.
And these were the women who grounded her and raised her. And these were very proper women. They were educators, and they raised her to be an educator. And so what she was raised with was poise and self-confidence. She was a performer in this girl group called the Chansonettes, so she had grace, she had musical talent, and so she had, much like Coretta Scott King, who would have been a great singer had she not been doing what she was doing. So she had all of these inherent talents that actually, in the end, enabled her to do what she needed to do as a widow of the civil rights movement, as the first national civil rights widow. So she already had that poise, that performative skill. But she grew up in Vicksburg, Mississippi, in a segregated rural southern town where there was a very great, clear understanding about racism and the potential for violence, even as a child. So she understood what she was dealing with in her assignment. But before she even met him, she had her own dreams, including her grandmama's dream, who she called Mama, that she would one day play, in Carnegie Hall in New York, which seemed like a fanciful dream for a little black girl from Vicksburg, Mississippi. But I won't spoil it for you, but it is a dream that was quite possible for her.
Right, possible. And it's refreshing to cue in on this skill set. And I like the way you just packaged it, that she had this poise that was owing to her grandmother and her auntie and mother, her birth mother,
and her mom,
her biological mother, pouring into her these things that she would use in a different way than she imagined. You describe her as the first widow. Of the civil rights movement.
Yeah, and I will give a special shout out to Medgar. Medgar is one of my favorite people in the book because she is the person who gives Merle permission to have her passionate love, because her grandma and her aunt were very skeptical of Medgar and they told her very clearly.
Yeah, Medgar had game, okay?
He did. He had to have the game on them.
Look, I didn't make that up.
He had to sell it to them because they said you are not to mess with upperclassmen, military veterans, and football players. Check. And she was like, she couldn't even tell them that's who she loved,
And he was 8 years older?
And 7 years older.
7?
And she was 17, and he was very clear that nothing was happening while she was 17, so he even understood that age difference. But they were very skeptical of just the idea of it. And so, but her skill set, she had to kick in for her when in '63 she loses her husband, something she saw coming. She had all the premonitions. But you have to realize this is 5 years before Dr. King is assassinated. This is 2 years before Malcolm X is assassinated. So there isn't another nationally known civil rights widow. There were plenty of civil rights widows in Mississippi because the Klan was killing black men with abandon, just freely. They killed a northern Chicago child, right? They were willing to kill anyone. But most of those women didn't walk out their front door to Dan Rather and CBS News in their face. She was the first one to have to deal with that. And so she had to call upon all of her skills, but also a thing that I think women, and particularly black women, understand is that the thing she was not allowed to access was her rage. And she wasn't just sad when she lost her husband, she was mad. She was angry. She was enraged. And wouldn't you be?
Rightfully so.
Right. She's seeing the police officers who followed her husband everywhere but didn't do a thing and weren't there, didn't happen to be there when he was killed.
Questioning her when her house is bombed.
Questioning her when her house is bombed, being skeptical of her, not being compassionate. She was angry at the NAACP, who she felt had failed to protect him and had been needling him and, angry with him about his methods and, saying that he wasn't doing a good enough job. She was angry that she was alone, that she now had to raise these beautiful children by herself. She was mad. But as women, we are told we're not allowed to be angry. We have to be.
Women, right?
And black women even more so, as the angry black woman. She would have been the original angry black woman. She would have been written off as just an angry shrew, and her husband's legacy would have gone down the drain with her.
Wow. So to have to harness that into something that was useful for countless people and future generations.
Absolutely.
Like we are benefiting from her restraint.
And she is the one who, when Betty Shabazz had to go through the same thing, Dr. Betty, it is Merle Evers who reached out to her. It is she who could convene with Coretta Scott King, and they become this sorority that no one wanted to join. Where they are now sisters because they understand each other's struggle in a way no one else can. But she had to learn that by herself with no one to teach her.
With no precedent, right? She had
no
nothing
precedent
to pull from. I want to talk right in tandem about this sisterhood, unfortunate sisterhood that is formed with Coretta Scott King and Dr. Betty Shabazz, but also this fraternity of men that we lost too early to this movement. And you positioning your argument, your thesis in this work is that Medgar Evers is sort of the jumping off point. He's the cornerstone.
Yeah.
His activism sets the stage for SNCC and CORE and all of these other organizations, which I think for those of us who are Mississippians, this is not news to us.
Right.
I think this is almost the way that we instinctively see it. But I'll be honest, it wasn't until I read that in your book that I realized that the nation didn't see it the way that we see it.
Right.
That they didn't figure in Medgar Evers and his sacrifices and his family sacrifices and Myrlie Evers in the same way that we have. And so I want you to kind of talk us through your decision to position them properly in history. And why do that now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is a really important time, you know, when history is being robbed from Black students and white students and students around the country, right? There's a war on our history that's taking place around the country.
That's right.
Because when people make connections, it sparks them to desire to make change. And when people have compassion, it also sparks a desire for change, right? And there's a fear of our history because our history is connective. So for Medgar Evers, he factors in to the better known stories that we know from this history of the heroic era, as I call the civil rights movement. James Baldwin said so. It's not me saying, it's James Baldwin, our greatest American writer, who said that these three, Medgar, Malcolm, and Martin, should be together, thought of as the great triumvirate of civil rights history. He knew them all. And he said they all three were, but people know Malcolm and they know Martin in a way they don't know Medgar. But here's what you need to understand. But for Medgar, it would have been very difficult to have a freedom rides movement because the actual young people, the students, the Mississippi students who were a part of those movements grew up in the NAACP youth councils. He's seeding their activism. You think of Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney. Cheney, the 20-year-old young Black man who was the connector with those two northern white heroic young men, he comes through the NAACP Youth Council movement as a high school student. He's pinning an NAACP handwritten sticker on his jacket and getting expelled. So they're coming through. Medgar believed that freedom could not be imported into Mississippi from the North. That Northern activists couldn't come here and give people the courage of their convictions. They needed to grow the courage here. And so he is creating these youth councils that then SNCC gets to build on. The Freedom Rides get to build on. Freedom Summer in '64, they get to build on it. Exactly, so he's building up the courage in the Mississippi Delta that then Fannie Lou Hamer gets to build on. When she goes to the convention in Atlantic City and talks about first-class citizenship, that's Medgar Evers' language. When John F. Kennedy is talking about presenting a bill, it's Medgar Evers who's been peppering him from the state of Mississippi demanding such a bill. He was actually going to go to Washington to testify for a Civil Rights Act. When Kennedy finally agrees to give the bill, to do the bill, the first person whose hands he places the paper copy of that bill in is Myrlie. As she's standing in the White House with her children, her bereaved children, he hands her a copy of that bill. When he doesn't move fast enough on that bill, it inspires Dr. King to march on him. They weren't marching for Kennedy, they're marching on Kennedy because he was moving too slow in the bill because he wanted to do a tax cut instead. That march is inspired in part by the assassination, which happened just hours after he promises to do the bill, and the Klan says, payback. It's a part of that. Dr. King gives the first version of his I Have a Dream speech in Detroit, Michigan, in front of 20,000 people, but he includes a line he later cuts out of the August 28, 1963 speech, which says, I have a dream that young people like Emmett Till and men like Medgar Evers can live their full lives. He actually talks about them in his I Have a Dream speech. They take that out to slightly tamp down and sanitize the speech for the March on Washington. He's in all these stories. The Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, we have Reverend Ed King here, they are his allies that then go to Atlantic City to protest against the Mississippi Democratic Party. It's his movement, and it's the branches from his movement that then create the better known Mississippi movements. And so he's in all these stories. Even the Emmett Till story, which became the most famous lynching before Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney, wouldn't have gone to court without the witnesses that Medgar goes and compels at the threat of their lives to testify, and then gets them very quickly on a train to Chicago. So all of these stories have him woven into it. And when he's woven into it, that means she's woven into it. Because as he's driving out into the Delta, the person left home with the kids trying to keep her sanity is Myrlie. And so they are a part of all of these better known stories. And so to me, it's a tragedy that he is not as well known off the top of people's heads as Malcolm and Martin. And so the purpose of this book is to elevate Medgar Evers to that status.
And I think by proxy, Mississippi,
Yes.
right, which I often describe, and this is the literature professor in me, as the picture of Dorian Gray, that everything unsavory gets projected onto Mississippi, and then other folks feel better about what's happening or not happening in their space, and you get to deny that you recognize that thing that you detest that's on display in Mississippi. So the work that you have done here and the elevating that you've done there in turn elevates us, and so we're grateful for that profile from the outside. Right? We're always singing our own story, and
it should be sung. I mean, to me, the most fascinating state in the Union is Mississippi, and it's actually the most important state to understand.
I agree.
If you want to understand America, you really have to understand Mississippi. And the reason I say that is that Mississippi is the state that had the most savage enslavement experience of any state. Savage. And that's because of the soil, of its sort of special thing, its rich alluvial soil, which allows Mississippi to produce the most
cotton.
Exactly. King cotton. The cotton that the Queen and King of England preferred was Mississippi cotton. With that Mississippi stamp on it, it was the most expensive and most demanded and most luxurious cotton in the world. And so to produce that cotton, they produced a kind of slavery that is almost impossible to describe the barbarity of it. And you know, somebody asked me in one of my other talks what was the thing that I wish that hadn't gotten cut out, because you know I turned in a book like that thick, and they was like, no, it gotta be like that thick.
Slice right through.
My editor was like, yeah, that's a lot. So I sprinkled it throughout the book, but I did a whole chapter that was just about slavery in Mississippi that I would have done. And it's terrifying when you read it, because what they had to do to produce that cotton was just inhumane. But at the end of it, the volume of people you needed meant that Mississippi had the largest black population of any state and a majority black population, 54, 55%. And so what happens is you get the state that is the richest state in the Union, Mississippi, because of the cotton, becomes the poorest state after the Civil War.
It's bankrupt.
It's completely bankrupt. But at the same time, because it is majority black, it has the most successful Reconstruction. It's actually textbook Reconstruction.
Oh, brilliant system.
You have
Reconstruction, public schools,
statewide black officials, legislators. Lynch, people think Lynch Street is named after a Lynch Law guy.
Jackson State University.
Hello. Right? One of the great men of the Reconstruction era.
Absolutely.
So it has this incredibly successful Reconstruction, this black and tan republicanism that then gets destroyed after the Compromise of 1877 in this 1890 Constitution that becomes the textbook, the pig laws, Jim Crow. This is the state that wrote the playbook. So you must understand it in order to understand this country.
See y'all taking notes. I don't understand. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about a little bit more about the love and the romance in this book, because what you are explaining there is part and parcel, I believe, for Mississippians' love for our state. We understand very clearly the role we play, the critical nature of our state's makeup in history. But I want to talk about this personal love story and these intimate nuggets, as I call, that you embed throughout the story. Talk to us a little bit about how you balanced embedding those intimacies in such a really challenging
Yeah.
challenging narrative. I mean, we know what's going to happen. We know some of the things they go through, but you find moments of light jesting between Merle and Medgar, and you embed them in certain moments. Listen, when I needed a bit of a break, but talk about the decision of implanting those moments.
Well, and I got those all from Miss Merle. Like, these are her stories. A lot of it was just from her talking about him and how much he loved to needle her. He just loved to get on her nerves. He would get on her last nerves, and he enjoyed it. He thought it was funny. He would call her Merle May. He would literally just try to. If she said it's up, he says it's down. If she says light, no, he says dark. He just would do it just to sort of challenge her. But I think what he was doing was preparing her for leadership. And his idea was he would constantly say to her, you're stronger than you think you are. You know more than you think you do. You are actually a strong person. You are, I know you're scared and I know you're afraid for me, but you're a strong person. He would constantly tell her that, and he would challenge her. Even when they first met, there, was a platonic, relationship at first because of her age, but he would talk to her about world events, and she would study up so she could be prepared.
Studying to talk to this man.
She's like, let me get to my homework so I can talk to him, because she just wanted to keep talking to him. And it was like this incredible, playful relationship. Some of my favorite stories of them are them, in their home on Dine Street, dancing to records, and her playing music for him. And, when he was exhausted, coming home and laying his head in her lap because he was exhausted from the day. These are the things that make you understand how a man could make those sacrifices. And then the other piece is a love story about Mississippi, because Medgar Evers loved Mississippi. And people can't understand why would you? I remember speaking to Tamron Hall, who's from the South. She's from Texas. And she's like, people don't understand, if you are from the South, you don't not love your place. You love it because of the things that it is, right? The rural nature of it, the ability to have fresh air and space, and not being in a concrete jungle, and having just, the air around you, being able to, And so he was like,
everybody felt that.
Come on, man. And he was like, no, I don't hate Mississippi. I want Mississippi to be good enough for my kids. I want the good things about Mississippi to be shared by everyone of every race. That's not a big ask. Just simple equality of citizenship. That's it. He wasn't asking people to completely, he was asking for people to treat black folks the way they wanted to be treated. That's a very basic ask.
Deserve to be treated. I love that there's a constant thread of this back and forth between them, and this equal partnership that they have. While Merle was typing his homework because those were the times, but she was also challenging him, who had been, he and his brother, Uncle Charles, right? Listen, they were out there, packed, ready to go vote, doing what they needed to do, and standing up and not stepping down from a fight. But the moment he meets Merle and starts to imagine more, starts to imagine family, starts to imagine someone dependent, and there's even a rift between the brothers. When that happens, which is understandable, it's natural. So she sort of grows him as well. I think I most appreciate about your book the way that you set up Merle as a pivot to Medgar's determination. He had always seemed to be this determined soul, knew what he wanted to accomplish when he comes home from service, but then he meets Merle. And it doesn't change his desires, but there is a pivot. I mean, his raison d'etre doesn't change, but I'm going to do this a little bit differently because now I see this partner that I need in this, that I can look at and say, all I need from you is to love me.
Right, and it's hard because it's a real marriage.
It's a real marriage.
They have arguments. They have problems.
He drove her back to Vicksburg, y'all.
He said, I got to drop you off. He said, take your child. Take her back. I can't deal with it. I love
that. And Merle did not get out of the car.
She was like, I'm not getting out of this car. He said, get out. Get out. He's like, he literally, and they thought about divorcing. I mean, the thing, what I did love about Miss Merle's honesty, her willingness to just be very clear, that this was a marriage that had its ups and its downs, that they had fights. She did not want him to apply to Ole Miss Law School. He wanted to be Thurgood Marshall. What I loved about Medgar Evers is he was a nerd like me. He was a nerd. I love my nerds. He was a nerd. He was interested in foreign affairs and African liberation. He was like a black nationalist. He's really into a whole lot of things. Look, he was he was the nerdy brother. Uncle Charles was the radical brother. He was the nerdy brother. But it's like, you know, he was a nerd who also played football, right?
That's right.
But, you know, they challenged each other. And there were times when she wanted out, which she did not. And I think a lot of...
Understandably so.
Of course.
My
And
gosh.
look, y'all have read Michelle Obama's book. I don't know if y'all read Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. She's very open. And she says, I was not down with this whole running for president thing. Alma Powell told Colin Powell, it's a no for me, dog. You are not running for president. No. And she literally stood up to Colin Powell and was like, you're not running. You're going to get killed. And she had the same, she said, first of all, I'm going to be a single mother, which she was.
Yes.
She's like, who's going to raise these
What
kids?
about us?
What about us? And she's honest about that. Miss Murley's honest about that too. She had very deep doubts about the things he was doing, driving out into the Delta to sell insurance plus liberation. That can get you killed.
Absconding sharecroppers from
Yes.
the owners of the land. That's
Thinking.
by the dark of night.
By the dark of night, I mean, these people were facing rape threats against their
yeah.
kids, being told to bring their daughters up to the big house. You know, they're being told that essentially they can't leave. They're trapped on these plantations like just above slaves. These lives were horrible. And when they needed to get out and get on that $11 ride to Chicago, they're turning to the field secretary of the NAACP. It's his job. He's going out there dressed as a field hand. He gets this Oldsmobile Rocket 88, which is like the fastest version of that Oldsmobile, so he can outrun the Klan. She never knows if he's coming home at night. And she's like, I didn't sign up for this. You're supposed to be an insurance salesman.
Right.
Aren't you going to sell insurance?
Why are we getting this degree in the first place?
That was a good job. You had a good job. You know, West Indian people say, I'm a good job. You can't just do your job. You know, then she's like, what are you doing? She was not, and she's open about the fact this isn't what she wanted. And she didn't, you know, when he said, no, we're going to sign our kids up to desegregate these schools, it was an argument. She's like, my kid, not my kids.
Not my babies.
And she was very open. And I think that's the realness that we have to have. We can't put these people as marble statues. They're not. They're human beings. And they would have the same doubts and same fears that any of us would have if our person said what they're going to do is risk their life to fight the Klan and the Sovereignty Commission, the statewide spy agency, and the citizens' councils, and just ordinary white folks who wouldn't do anything to help you if they did see you were going to get lynched. And so you had this sort of constant war against cowardice. And we were talking outside, even against subterfuge from within the community. You don't know who's spying on you, who's black.
What I think you described in the book is these, I mean, it's in scare quotes, right? The fake black leaders.
Yeah.
Who were willing to sell out their, It's in the book, y'all. Okay. Who were willing to be bought.
Yeah.
Who were willing to sell out community. Who were willing to put these stopgaps in progress for what seemed like personal gain and protection.
Yeah.
But ultimately, endangering their community more. I mean, you talk about that, and I think one of the most chilling parts of the entire text is it is so recognizable.
Yeah.
Not only that part, but these other moments where you are proud to be a Mississippian, but don't always feel loved by the state of Mississippi.
Yeah.
And the best service you can do as a proud Mississippian is to indict those tragic flaws and do something to change it. But there's no reward in that. There's no glory in that. And so you see remnants of present day in these things that this is supposed to be historic.
Right.
And it's very present.
Yeah.
That's chilling.
I mean, it's so much easier to go along with the system. No risk to your life. You know, So you think, right? I mean, back then, if you just signed up for an NAACP membership, you could have your mortgage recalled because the citizens' councils were the people who owned the banks.
Right.
They'll find lose your job, get fired, get evicted. You know, just signing up.
Yeah.
You know, that was a risk. Registering to vote, you get lynched, right? You could be murdered just for trying to sign up to vote. It's terrifying. And so, you know, the idea of having courage is like a very big subtext for the book. But on the other side of that, you had this Sovereignty Commission set up after Brown versus the Board of Education. Again, Mississippi leading the way in terms of how to fight by all means necessary integration. And they set up the Sovereignty Commission, which is basically an FBI for the state. It's a spy agency that then infiltrates all of the organizations, the civil rights organizations. And again, people can't really perceive it now because the NAACP sort of has been Muppetized in the minds of most people.
Yeah.
They think of it as this sort of nice organization that does galas and things. But at the time, it was the biggest, fiercest, most
they're
feared.
agitators. It's called agitators, right?
Exactly. They were considered the most feared organization in the country before the SCLC and King came along. And so people were threatened by them. And so the spy agency would hire pastors, newspaper editors, informants, and they would literally spy on their own people. And a couple of them got busted by the Clarion Ledger and published in the paper how much money they were getting. And from their point of view, I think the guy who was the editor of the largest black newspaper in Jackson was one of them. And his sort of justification, he despised the NAACP, is that in his mind, the system under segregation was doing well for black businesses, and that businesses did better when they had a captive audience. And there's an argument people would make.
There's an argument there.
There's an argument there. And so they justified it by saying, why would we give up segregation when we have a captive audience for our dry cleaner, or I guess it was dry cleaner back then, for our, our barber shops, for our restaurants, for our,
salons,
right, you have to come to us, right? And so why would we give up this captive audience to let y'all go and shop with white folks? We're happy with the system. But the problem with the system, even though, yes, there was a black economy inside of segregation, but your version of it, you didn't get your street in front of your shop swept the same way. You didn't get sanitation services the same way. Your school was a shack. Your school didn't have beakers.
Fourth hand books
written in them, and pages missing.
Pages.
So everything you had, yes, you had a captive audience, but everything you had was lesser.
Yeah.
And so you're not getting, there was no separate and equal. It was just separate.
Were you telling me time? Okay. Rita said no, so. I want to talk about, because what we're discussing is that there is this drawing the past into the present, and we recognize so much of this, which is what I describe as chilling, but there's an accessibility and a relatability that you also capture in this book, even in terms of the language. I'm gonna read. Not a whole portion. I just want to read the first line of this book, you all. If you have your book, turn with me.
I heard we have an overflow, so we're going to act like we're in church. Turn to your scripture.
Turn to. Okay. The very first line in the prologue, which is titled Love, reads, "The thing about love is that it has no chill." Our finger snails, we're just So I read that line, I underlined it, and I read it over and over and over again, right? So this is my literary analysis, going crazy, but I thought this is a line that my students will immediately have the context for.
Yeah.
They will understand it. They will keep moving. It won't stop them in their tracks. Now, my mama and my daddy will be completely baffled by that. And so, and there are moments, you play around with form. It's historical, and it's straight up history at moments. You engage the audience. Sometimes we feel like it's just a love story and boy meets girl. You play around with form, but which made me wonder who your audience is.
That's a good question.
For this text.
That, you know what? No one's ever asked me that. That's a really great question.
In Jackson, of course we ask.
Yes. Listen, come on, Jackson. This is the mothership, though.
Yes,
This is the room where it happened. This is the room where it happened. That's a great question. I generally try to write my books, not necessarily for the history nerds like me, but for people who are just interested in great stories and history, and who care about the past, but want to read about it in a way that's accessible and not too wonky. You know, I try to not go so wonky that it's not accessible to just regular folks who just want to read a great story.
Yeah.
So I think it can be anyone from somebody who just loves love to somebody who just cares about history and everything in between, and people who really know the history. A lot of people actually do know more of it than they think, because they may think they know who this is, but they're just not sure. A lot more people, at least in the modern era, know Merle.
That's
because
right.
she's still here. And so they know she's the lady who spoke at the Barack Obama second inaugural, you know what I mean? So she's got a lot more resonance, I think. But I think for Medgar Evers, people will land in Medgar Evers International Airport and have no idea why. Right?
Listen.
We've done we cheated. We went to Medgar Evers College, and they had some high school students come in, but they had prepped them. They knew exactly what.
It's like Piney Woods, they're here all prepped.
Yeah, the Piney Woods kids.
Hey y'all.
Come on now, Piney Woods. But I think
I
if you
love
just
that.
did a man on the street to regular people, most people, if you say, I
Yeah.
did it at my job. So I just asked the stage, the little stage crew, and I just asked random stage people, and they were just like, when I said, who's Medgar Evers? They said, is it the billionaire who gave money to Medgar Evers College? I'm like, no, not a millionaire, no. But I mean, so people just don't know. So
Yeah.
I've kind of wrote it for anyone who loves a good love story, but who also is interested in knowing something about this country.
I appreciate that because you do what we do with our children. You like snuff the vegetables in.
The veggies are
with
in
the
there.
tasty
Yeah.
stuff. So there's a story. I mean, it's a page turner. You won't put it down, but you will come away from it so much more informed, so much smarter, so much prouder to be affiliated with Mississippi in whatever way that you are. Michael, are you telling me it's time for questions? It's time for questions. Okay, because I have a whole booklet here. All right, so, but you all don't be shy. I think we're ready for questions. Where are my mic handlers?
I see someone, yep.
Okay, there's one. Joy. So if you have a question, there's two. Jasmine back. So if you have a question, I think would you want raise hands and y'all are gonna shimmy down these? Fantastic. Okay. All right, hands up. Questions for Joy. And
Sorry, my mic has been bad. Can you hear me?
Right back here. Hold on.
Question in the back.
Okay, hopefully that's better.
Thank you for this important book, bringing Medgar Evers and Merle Evers to our attention again. We have honored them, but we haven't done enough. It'd be interesting to see what you think we can do to get this story alive. Your book is so important. And by the way, I checked on something. I learned something or remembered something in reading it, which was that under Naval Secretary Ray Mabus,
Yes.
under President Obama, a ship was commissioned.
That's right.
Ray Mabus has confirmed it was the first ship commissioned by him, first under President Obama.
Yes. Absolutely. And well, I mean, you're absolutely right. And that is one of those things, right? It's a sort of hidden history of Medgar Evers. And his being a World War II veteran is so key to the book. It's a big part of the narrative. It's one of the reasons that Kennedy connected with him. They had that in common. And his World War II heroism, number one, gave him the physical courage. It sort of showed his physical courage. And he was part of that Red Ball Express, which were the unsung heroes of D-Day. And so I think, to your question of how do we get this story to be out there more, I just think people just need to talk about this brother more and talk about his Merle. I just think we need to talk about and to them more. These wonderful heroes, they're here, but they're not going to be here forever. And we need to honor them and give them their flowers while they're here.
Agreed. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
My name's Erica Harris. I'm the PR and Education Manager for the Margaret Walker Center in the Cocoa Center here. So I'm really excited to be
Yes.
here. So I think that Mississippi is very unique because it's distilled, the history's distilled, and it hasn't been commercialized in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And with that said, because it hasn't been commercialized in a lot of ways, I've been blessed to see God here in a very moving way through Jackson State as well as through the Cocoa Center. And I find it interesting that when people come to the Cocoa Center, they treat it as like an altar to lament and not one of gratitude. So how, because you like make gratitude a huge thing by putting it in this book, but specifically with these figures that we often idolize and kind of, I guess to my coworker Lisa Reid, she says that Coco's like a dragonfly, an ember. So how do we portray COFO as this space of, just vibration in the way that it once was?
That's a great question. And Margaret Walker Alexander, by the way, Margaret Walker, another great Mississippian.
A neighbor.
And the neighbor, honey. The neighbor. When you go on that block, she got the only 2-story house. She kind of like could say, who's going to be on the block? Let me approve them. Because this was,
HOA president.
well, even the block, Guine Street, which is now named for Margaret Walker Alexander, it's now her block, and then there's a Medgar Evers block that's nearby. It itself is historic. The 2 black men who designed this block, these are black developers in the 1950s who were able to create this 1-block subdevelopment that was historic in its own right. Yeah, and so I think all of these little pieces of Mississippi history are so resonant for all of the country that I just hope this actually does spark more interest in Mississippi, because there is so much here. We met the lovely lady who administers the home, which is now part of the National Park Service. You can visit the home.
Yeah.
It's part of the National Park. Yes, it's a national park. You have a national park on that block. And I walked it with Frank Figures, who I don't know if he's here, but Frank Figures is one of our wonderful friends. Where is Frank? Where's Frank? So Frank is one of the people that we interviewed for the book, and he talked about the fact that these are the preservation opportunities. There's so many opportunities of things that we can pour into just as a people. We have so much money. We have $1 trillion just in Black wealth and in allied wealth. If you say Black and allied wealth, we're talking about trillions of dollars here. We should be investing in the Evers Institute. We should be investing in preservation of our stories, our landmarks. These are things that we can actually do.
And telling them on our own terms.
And telling those stories in our own terms. So what I'm hoping is that this just sparks like the creativity of the Frank Figures of the world, of the Evers family. There's so many creative things that we can do to make sure that Mississippi history and the Evers family history and people don't really know that much about Fannie Lou Hamer. I'm sort of shocked.
That's very true.
Like they really don't.
That's very true.
And they know, when Tim Scott quoted her to say how much he loved the person who I shall not name because I'm off today, I'm not working tonight, so I'm not going to name him. But when he used it for that, he knows who she is. He knows who he was quoting. But he knows most of the people who heard him say that and use her line have no idea. And so he's appropriating the history of a great woman and a glorious and a hero of the civil rights movement to impart that glory onto an undeserving man. And so that only happens when people don't know. If people knew, he couldn't get away with it. That's why he had to be called out on it. So I think what we need to do is seize back this history to make it as well known as people think they know Martin, because they don't know him either. Because they think he's a Muppet. And they think he said one line. They don't even know the rest of that speech.
Not even the most.
They don't even know the whole speech. Right. It's so odd when President Obama was Senator Obama and he got in so much trouble because his pastor said GD America. He's quoting a Dr. King line that he said, America just might go to hell. That's Dr. King. And the whole boycott movement that Dr. King created, particularly in Montgomery, Alabama, is what inspired Medgar Evers. The reason he got in so much trouble with the NAACP is he wanted to create a Birmingham, Montgomery movement in Mississippi. He wanted to do boycotts. He wanted to do sit-ins. He wanted to the kids wanted to do it, and he wanted to do it. And New York was like, this is not what we're doing. We're doing court. And he was like, no, we're doing the streets. And so that in understanding King helps you understand Medgar Evers. So it's like they're all connected. These people were not isolated from each other. They knew each other, they talked to each other, they worked together.
And you leave so many crumbs. I want to say that this is not a book that you will read and walk away not invigorated to know more, to learn more, to pick up on what was left. You leave those crumbs for us. So my hope is that we all pick up a piece of it and keep pushing and keep moving with it.
And keep pushing. And there are people doing it. I think about the Tennessee Three. This is what I'm talking about. These are young people and a lovely, let's give our sister in the 60s, Miss Gloria Johnson, but Justin Pearson, Justin Jones, and Gloria Johnson, they're standing up against the Speaker of the Tennessee House. They're standing up against the powerful gun lobby in Tennessee. They're standing up against the people who don't want to give Tennessee children food. They want to deny them school lunch. They're standing up against gun violence. That's bravery, and that's all it takes. And what Medgar would say is, not everybody has the courage to necessarily do a sit-in and get arrested. Not everybody is necessary. And look, we're not going to wrong them for that. But you know what you can do? You can not shop. You have to, you don't have to do anything. Stay home. If you just don't go and shop in that store and deprive them of that economic benefit of your dollars because they won't call you Mrs. and they won't be respectful to you, now you've taken a step toward your own liberation. So he's saying take small steps, Mom, because your child is willing to sit in. Take a little step and don't go to humiliate yourself in a restaurant and sit in the back. Cook your food at home. You can do that. That is your dignity you're taking. You're seizing your dignity. And so all he's saying is seize your dignity in small steps because your children are in these streets.
Yeah, and there's a
They're
love story
brave.
wrapped up in that.
Oh, absolutely. That's love.
That's love.
That's love.
Self-love, community love.
Community love, self-love, love of your people. And so it's like you can actually, you know, I was saying we were just in St. Louis, is that the thing about love is it will make you run into a burning building because that's your child. Right? And that's where you get courage from. Love gives you courage. You love your family, and so you say, I'm willing to fight this system for my kids. I'm willing to fight the Klan for my kids. That's all Medgar Evers was doing. He was loving his people and his family and his wife enough to fight to make Mississippi good enough for them.
Yeah. We've got one here, and then how many more?
I think
do we have
here.
time for?
If you all, yeah.
Cassie here?
Ooh,
Okay.
maybe if everybody asks him, I'll try to be short. I'll be
I
quick.
know. Okay, one in the back, and then.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Felicia Williams. I wanted to ask two questions, actually. But let me say that I am a fan indeed.
Thank
From the time of AM George all the way to the Reid out now.
Thank you.
And all your work. So
Thank
you
you.
so much for what you do.
Thank you.
But my two questions. The first question deals with the fact that when we look at the legislation efforts and realities of that being whitewashing history from K through college, and the banning of books in libraries, things that we wouldn't have thought years ago would be happening in America that are happening. What is, and with this captive audience, what are some of the recommendations that you have to overcome or to deal with those efforts? That's question number one. And question number two, I do have your book. I didn't get a chance to get it signed.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Okay, we were supposed to make this announcement. If you didn't get a chance to get your book signed, we're going to do another like 20 minutes. I'm going to go back out, and so I'm going to go back to the book signing desk so that anybody who didn't get their book signed, I will sign it. So you guys will go back in line. So yeah. And as far as very quickly on the banned books thing, one of the things a lot of my girlfriends and I are talking about is doing things where we just buy a lot of books and send them to schools, send them to libraries, and stocking books in libraries. So, and then people like Allie Velsh, who have the Banned Books Club. When you see a book has been banned, that's an opportunity to buy it as a gift for somebody. That's an opportunity to buy that banned book, especially the books for kids, to make sure they have them.
Books for the baby.
Absolutely.
And go read Across America on March 1st.
Yes.
One of those banned
Buy
books.
banned books.
Yeah, excellent recommendation. There was a question here. Shout out. Yeah.
Okay.
You're in the book.
It's so good to see you.
So good to see you again.
Oh my goodness.
Look, I had to, but I'm just gonna make it brief and say that I know your other passion, and it is about cotton. And I want to know, is that gonna be the next in your series of writing? And the other part of it was, how well do you know Ava DuVernay? Because that's our origins, and this would be a perfect subject for her.
Oh my God. Well, listen. You might know her better than I do. I know her a little bit. You can call her and tell her I'd love to do it. And I'll just say quickly, you'll read a lot about and this is one of the sisters who is a fabulous professor and a wonderful professor, Ms. Chardonnay. We love you. So thank you for participating in the book. And all of you who are here who did interviews and were interviewed in the book, I just thank you so much. But I will definitely, if I can get my publisher to let me write a whole book about Mississippi cotton, I'll come on down and do it. All right, let's go.
And you'll come back.
And I love Jackson. I love Mississippi, so I will definitely be back.
We have a new Jacksonian.
And by the way, yes, we will. Yes, go ahead. Let's go back here.
I think
those hands are up. Maybe if 1, 2, 3 stand up, that your hands are up, and then have the mic just go and each ask the students. These are the students. Let's let the students ask each of your questions, and I'll answer them all at once. And then the last question will be back there. So you'll be the last, but let's have the students go first. So ask yours, and then let this young lady ask hers. So yes, sir. Hello.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Lewis. I'm a sophomore at Piney Woods. My question to you is, what ways do you think our generation should ensure that people like Mr. and Mrs. Evers and their legacy continues to go on to further generations?
Oh, I love that question. Okay, let's pass the mic there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michaela Gathright.
Hello.
I'm a sophomore at the Pineywood School. By the way, Miss Reid, my grandma watches you every day.
That's my base. Mamas and grandmas, my base.
Being as though Merle consistently had to fight against the angry black woman trope. What advice would you give to us as young black women still constantly trying to defy the stereotype? What attitude or mindset would you suggest we use?
Thank you so much. The answer to the young man's question, take over. Y'all need to run for, listen, as soon as y'all old enough, run for office, take over this. The older folks can't get it right. We need you all to run. Young people, be like the Justins. Take over, please. Vote and then run for office and take over everything. And young person, because seriously, the laws are passed by politicians. They're passed by school board members. They're passed by Congress. They're passed by state senators, state reps. We need a complete takeover by your generation because you guys are sensible and you guys are forward-leaning and brave. So we want you to run. And for you, young lady, the one thing that I definitely learned from Miss Merle is that there's nothing wrong with being angry when you got a reason to be angry. There's not a damn thing, excuse me language, wrong with being angry when you have a reason to be angry. But there's a way that you can channel your anger into a kind of communication that is actually vibrant and made vibrant by anger, but that actually articulates a solution. When she got up and she was so angry and so full of rage to walk down this church, the long vestibule of this church and speak for the first time after her husband was assassinated, she had to pull everything in her, the chansonette's poise. She had to pull her performative ability. She had to find her inner preacher because she used to play the organ, the piano. She had to find all of that performative skill and distill that anger down into a message. There's nothing wrong with being angry, but you have to have something to say. And if you have something to say and you've thought that through, that anger then translates into passion. And no one can argue with passion. And now your question is the last one, sir.
Hello, my name is Camilla Hall.
Camilla, you, yes, go.
Oh, okay. My name is Camilla Hall, and I'm a junior from the Pineywood School.
Yes.
And my question to you is...
Uh-oh. That's okay.
What made you decide to turn this book and make this book a book and not a film, considering your background?
That's a good question. Well, it's interesting enough that I do TV, but I primarily consider myself to be a writer. Yeah. That's like the thing that I love doing the most, and that's what I consider my greatest skill. And I will say for all my young Piney Woods students, and I'm so proud of you guys, writing is the best skill to have. If you're a good writer, you will never be unemployed. You will always have a job. You can be a journalist, a lawyer, whatever job. Good writers are so hard to find. Have great writing skills, and you can be anything that you want to be.
Come to campus with me tomorrow.
Listen, I will come on, because I used to teach school. I used to teach, at the college level, and you'd be surprised. There's not a lot of writing is such a difficult skill, but if you can harness it, you can do anything. Yeah. So I'm primarily a writer. So when I think about like ideas and creative ideas, I primarily think about the written page. But I'm a journalist, so that's sort of my avenue. The TV thing I love to do because I like to talk, as you can tell.
But you have to write something before you get on to television.
Yeah, I have to. Yeah, it has to be written. Yeah, and I go through those scripts with a fine-tooth comb, honey. We come up with it together as a whole process. So writing is important. And I think the gentleman here is going to be. Were you asking a question or no? Oh, you've been standing. Yes, you are my last question, sir. Yeah. Yes. Shout it out. Yes.
Wait, how did you know this? Your mom's from Guyana.
My mom is Guyanese. Yes. Okay, GT Posse in the house.
Is your father from a country in Africa?
Congo. Yes, my father. That's my younger brother over there. So our mom is from Guyana, and our father, they're both deceased, but our father was from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Your parents are international lovers.
Yes. But I will say, their love story was not nearly as sweet as the love story that's in this book. Keeping it real.
You are American. Is your husband Jamaican?
Wow, you know a lot about us. Yes. He's Jamaican, originally from London, from England, but yes, his family is Jamaican.
Jamaican.
Yeah.
So you have lovers, family who are international
yes.
culture.
Okay.
But they're lovers, but they're from
yes.
different countries in love with each other. Am I making sense?
You are. And
you yourself is in an international relationship with a Jamaican. Now the question is,
I know where it's going. Where's this going, my friend?
The question is, with these international cultures that you're involved in, and then you write about a culture of the two lovers who are of a similar culture
Sure.
from Mississippi.
Uh-huh.
So you have parents that are international cultures in love. Now the question is, do you think that those loves that are of international cultures, is that better than the culture?
No! My friend, thank you. I know. I'm a Pan-Africanist.
There we go.
So I'm a Pan-Africanist. I believe that Africa is shared by all. It's just a matter of where the ship dropped you off, Poppy. We are all the same. We might have different accents. You have a Mississippi accent. Somebody have a Jamaican accent. At the end of the day, they stole us all, honey.
We're going to give you some Mississippi residency as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Ebony. Wonderful job. Thank you, my sister. Much appreciated. You did so good. Thank you. Thank y'all.